Preparation is absolutely key. And it means that when I start my program, I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling organized, I'm feeling that I'm going to do the best job I can possibly do. If I'm not prepared, then I get very anxious about it. So all things technical, and there are many of them. If you are going to be delivering a program for a client, a customer, it's really understanding what IT they're going to use, what platform they're going to use. But it's really important that you understand what your client wants to use and what you want to use. The level of knowledge and familiarity of your participants and your guest speakers on your programs, you need to consider them as well with technology. And is it accessible for the participants that you're wanting to be able to attend or participate in your program? And also when it comes to guest speakers, I once made the assumption that guest speaker knew what they were doing online and they didn't have a clue, despite telling us that they were perfectly happy with what they were about to do. And it really did sort of hijack the program, and it was disappointing. So it was a lack of preparation. I hadn't checked some of those things out. Will you have any support from a technical producer? And I know there are trainers who run programs themselves and do everything without having a technical producer. The other thing to think about is that whether it's you that sends them out, depending on the type of program that you're going to be, you will need to prepare joining instructions. So something that goes out to all your participants that explains how things will happen, how they access the call, what they're going to need. And the devil is in the detail. But if you forget some of those small things, you think you're starting your program, you're missing half your participants. It's usually because they haven't received something in their joining instructions. And again, those joining instructions, I need to emphasize the non-technical things as well. So about setting the scene, explain to participants in advance that they need to have a space where they can talk confidentially. And you also might want to consider setting up a resource page for your group. I use something called Padlet, and it's a page you can set up as a confidential page resource table, like for the group. And again, you need to set that up and make sure the links, confidential links, are sent out to the group in advance. And all of that, the sort of detail, the clarity, the timing of it is important, because otherwise you end up sort of thinking, oh, hang on, I'm just going to shut the door and hope all these things don't sort of escape from behind the door because I've forgotten to do them. And again, it's knowing yourself and how you're going to feel if you haven't done a whole load of things that you realize you should have done. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, and it will touch on it when it comes to engaging with your participants, but something else I put into my joining instructions is a clear brief that the time your participants are committing to the program, that you ask they're not distracted by other devices, they haven't got other computers on in the background, so they can really engage with the workshops and the program. And again, you do a reminder about that at the beginning. Program manuals I'm talking about the trainer's manual now. Section 11B, on page 11 onwards, there are lots of details about how to set up a virtual program and some of the reminders. So there are other things in terms of preparation that you'll be thinking about. So one of the themes and the tips that some of the other trainers shared was treat it as you would preparing for a normal workshop. So you do whatever you're doing to prepare for your workshop, but you will have to make some adjustments because it's going to be virtual. It's a little bit different. So your PowerPoint will be different if you are delivering virtually, if you're delivering online. So you have to realize that you can't just pick up your PowerPoint and think, oh, I've got my workshop one PowerPoint ready, and you realize then, oh, hang on a minute, this is going to work differently. The timings will also be different. It also needs to include, in my experience, more stretch screen comfort breaks than you would have planned on a face-to-face program. You see lots of nods. Something I struggle with, because I'm always trying to jam the program into the time I've got, and I'm thinking, oh, we've got to have a break, and I haven't got time for a break. But it's so important that you do plan them in. And again, a piece of experience from my point of view is when we have breaks, I take them myself. I go outside, I walk up my drive and come back again, even if it's raining. And I do take stretch breaks as well and get away from my screen. And it's tempting to think, oh, I'll just worry about my next session. But it's so important, as we all know. Otherwise, you just get square eyes and rounded shoulders, and it doesn't do you any good. Your timed program also needs to be clear so that you know when you're going to use things like breakout rooms, if you're going to show a video, if you've got a speaker coming in. Really helps to know what that timing is if you've got people joining the call as well. Your environment is also important. So knowing your screens, whether you're going to use multi-screens, one screen, a laptop. And again, in the technical tips, there are lots of little pearls of wisdom. And I use a laptop stand, which has got my notes on it, which I use in front of my screen. And I'm hoping your experience is that means you not continually seeing the top of my head because I'm reading my notes on the desk. That works for me. You'll all have different things that you like to use and work with. I quite like the fact that when I'm delivering online, I can have things all over the place. Whereas if you're in the room with everybody, you've got your little cards with the ring on the corner, and you're not allowed to have a big piece of paper and all of the stuff we've maybe covered in our licensing courses. So there are some benefits as well of being able to have things. I have Post-its everywhere, all over my desk by the end of a workshop, which of course you can't all see. So that's quite handy. Make sure, again, your environment is comfortable. It's got to be comfortable for you. And I did a workshop a while ago, and I was talking to somebody who said that they did a meeting. It wasn't a workshop, but they hadn't realized they were looking at things on one screen. So all the participant could see was the side of their face. And then they tried to rearrange their screens, and they ended up having real problems with their neck over a period of time. So, you know, making sure your environment is comfortable is so important because it's a long time you're going to be using the screens as well. Think about your camera, think about your lighting. So I got past a great tip on a light from Logitech, which goes on your spare screen because my room is quite dark. And if the sun comes out in the afternoons, people can't see me. So thinking about the environment you're in is really, really important. Think about contingency. So what happens if, and there are many what happens ifs, but if you lose all your power, so I've had power cuts in the middle of workshops. If your whole system goes down, there could be all sorts of things that happen. And you can plan again. So for me, part of the backup plan and having a technical producer means that everything's in place. And if need be, the technical producer can get the group into their home groups to do the next part of the exercise while we frantically try and work out how we're going to resume normal service. It is possible you can log back on via your mobile phone if that's something that you know how to do. So it's just simple things. I always make sure my laptop's charged. I always make sure my mobile phone is charged, and then you've got those backups in place. You can't prevent things happening that you weren't expecting, but it can really, really help if you've got some sort of plan in place, if it does. And then lastly, confidence and familiarity. So the confidence bit is knowing where you will feel vulnerable, where you will feel anxious, what will worry you if something happens, and then thinking it through and planning for it makes such a difference. So your preparation really, really matters. But it's also, if it's early programs, you haven't run many programs, or maybe it's even going to be your first program, then it's being clear about what you need to make it as successful as you can for you, as well as for your participants. And I would really strongly suggest practicing. So get friends and family online. I did some amazing sessions, which were complete rubbish when I first started trying to deliver online, with lots of things of, I have no idea, I can't see anything, my screen disappeared. Well, if it's friends and family, it doesn't matter. And you get used to seeing what happens when you're running a work, the things in your workshop. So try everything out, and then you're familiar with it. It really makes such a difference. And then you will feel more confident. So thinking about how do you create engagement and energy online, whichever program you're running, all of the Springboard Consultancy programs are designed to be interactive, to have sessions in home groups. So a lot of that is already there, but as we're all aware, it's a different dynamic when it's online. So one of the things that you might want to think about when you're looking at your preparation for your programs, if you do change your sessions around, and I know sometimes that has to happen, just be really clear about, have I got a good mix of interaction in the sessions? Because if you start taking them out of order, you can suddenly realize you've had an awful lot of input, and online that gets harder work for everybody. So, stick with the program is the main advice. So first one, if you have the facilities and only it feels natural for you, stand up to present or interact. Variety, using as many different ways as possible to get the participants to interact with the system.
Menti.com is a real-time an engaging app, if you want to call it one for a better word, but you don't need to download this. So I use it, for example, to sort of gauge, what everyone's energy levels are, or how they're feeling, or we're going to take a poll. So I would then create the Menti slide, because it's like a PowerPoint slide, and it will generate, I think it's an 8-figure, almost like a password, pass number that you need to put in. And as our participants, they would have to go on their mobile phone, www.menti.com, and then it will say, what is your code, voting code? So I don't know, that's going to be very good, but no. So like that, they don't have to download, drop that in, and then guess what? Me as a presenter, I will click, and obviously the slides will come up, and then you've got the variety, whether you want to do a scalar, a pie chart, a word cloud. It's very, very interactive, and you can see how many people are actually participating, and you can set it up such that obviously nobody knows who's actually submitting their feedback, and that can be really, really engaging and fun as well.
Yeah, Kahoot is like a quiz, and you can use that. Again, they use their phones, so they need to have access to a mobile, so you need to think about that in your preparation. And it's a free app, so you can set up in advance a Kahoot quiz, and then you say to people, right, okay, you could tell them in advance they need to just make sure they've got the Kahoot app downloaded on their phones. Then you can start the quiz, and then they interact on their phones, and you get like it's all sorts of graphics on there. You can have music on there. It puts a podium as to who's in the lead or whatever. Or they could do it, I guess they might be able to do it in teams. I haven't tried that, but yeah, it can be quite a good way of the interaction, quite a bit of fun. But again, we discussed that it's the time aspect of it that is been the big challenge, is how am I going to make that session work with that particular app or whatever. But it's another good option. I hadn't heard of the Menti one either, so that was useful.
So I've written about the Zoom annotation tool, which you will find at the top of your screen when somebody is sharing their screen. So, for example, in workshop 2, if we're showing the change curve, I ask the participants to make a mark on the change curve and maybe write their name or an initial that indicates where they are on that change curve with a particular change they're with at the moment. And that allows them to interact with the curve and start to really think and give an example of where they might be with that curve. And it doesn't have to be a big life change. It can just be, maybe we've got some new software, which we're learning. and then I'll take a screenshot of that slide and either put it in the Padlet area or some other shared area that people are using, so they know they contributed to that slide, and they're able to record something of themselves within the presentation. And it also helps them learn a little bit more about how Zoom works as well. So it gives them a little bit of confidence with the program.
The program that you're going to be running is a mixture of face-to-face and virtual workshops. So thinking about your client or the group that you're going to be working with, if it's not actually an organization as such, why might they want a hybrid or a blended program? So there's lots of considerations. So I really want to understand why hybrid as a start. My experience is there is extra workload for me as the trainer in terms of prepping all my notes and my PowerPoint for different session delivery and different timings. So, you know, your face-to-face is one set, but then you're changing to hybrid, then you're going back to face-to-face, and you've got to change things as a result. And that's all extra time, and extra time means you're maybe not necessarily getting paid for it. And it is extra effort as well. And also your joining instructions become quite complicated because you've got joining instructions that are going out for face-to-face, then for your virtual, and maybe then back to face-to-face. So my experience has been, it's been a surprise to me as to how much extra time that's taken. And also for your guest speakers, because you might have some speakers that you can use for a workshop because it's virtual and they're not having to travel, so it doesn't matter where your speaker is. But if it's a face-to-face workshop and your speaker is going to be there in person, that might be a consideration in terms of their travel or budget, or whether you have them in your workshop, but your speaker is attending virtually, so you have them on screen. All of those things are things that you might want to think about. So for me, the benefits are things like, the biggest one for me is just seeing people, just being in a room with people. I get ridiculously excited about it. And I just love getting to know my participants a bit more. It's just, you're all smiling, you know what I'm talking about. It's just such a different experience than it is online. Having a chat with somebody over your cup of tea when they get there, those sorts of things really makes a difference. And also for me, one of the benefits of having some of the program face-to-face is that I get a sense of how they're doing just by being in the room with them. And the other benefit I've sensed is that participants are getting the best of both worlds. So where you've got a group where some love the virtual, some love the face-to-face, then you're able to offer both.